Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a huge number of SIM cards are susceptible to over-the-air attacks. Allan's got the details, plus the Apple hacker outs himself, the Ubuntu forums have some troubles, and then it's a big batch of your emails and our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 120 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on July 25th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by Ting.com. Visit techsnap.ting.com to save $25 off your first device. And by GoDaddy.com. I'll tell you more about GoDaddy as the show goes on. And of course, the live stream is powered by Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com, the amazing content distribution network. Go check it out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host. Some say he used to teach, that he can count packets in his sleep. All we know is that he is called Mr. Allan Jude. Hey there, Allan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Where did that line come from? Some say he used to teach, and that he can count packets in his sleep.
It's a Top Gear reference.
Okay. I thought that might be the case.
Funny introductions for the Stig every week, right?
Now, I want to warn folks, if you hear a thudding sound, maybe something that sounds like that, that's just me falling asleep, going on like about 45 minutes of sleep. My wife had our third child last night. But she timed it. I mean, this is what a pro Ange is. You know that she cares about the TechSNAP show. She didn't want to be the one to interrupt 120 episodes in a row. So she timed it that way. She'd go into labor about 1 a.m., start the whole process up, and then be wrapped up just in time for me to come out here and do the show. And now she's sleeping up in the bedroom. So yeah, big show today. We've got a very selective amount of feedback because we're storing things up because next week, the 1st, we're recording 2 episodes of TechSNAP back-to-back. We're going to start 2 hours early next week, so join us live 2 hours early for a big back-to-back double TechSNAP event. And we still need more emails. So email us your TechSNAP questions.
Or email.
Yeah, TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, or you can use even the BitMessage address. We have that in the show notes. Or start a thread in our subreddit over at TechSNAP, or links.techsnap.tv. And we'll have a big episode full of feedback next week when we record one of those. And I always love that. But why don't we start with the news this week? And the story coming out, I saw it on Russia Today, and I'm seeing it being picked up all over now. Researchers have found that about, 1/4 of SIM cards might be susceptible to some sort of attack?
Yeah, so it's an over-the-air attack, too, which makes it especially bad. So yeah, a team of researchers were attempting to crack SIM cards by sending over-the-air commands to the phones, and they weren't really getting anywhere. They've been trying since 2011, and it just, they haven't found any vulnerabilities yet. But then they noticed that on certain commands they would send, they would get back an error message that contained this weird code. And they eventually determined that code was actually the unique encryption code belonging to that phone. And by cracking that, they could then give the phone commands that it would execute.
I see. So they could they could say things like, erase, or they could...
So they would send a certain over-the-air command to the phone, and the phone would send back this error message that contained enough information that they could crack it and get the key to unlock that phone. So 1 in 4 devices that still use DES encryption on the SIM card, which is about 3 billion devices, so about 750 million devices are susceptible to this.
Oh, okay.
And currently there's no way for you to tell if your phone is susceptible or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, you combine this with the litany of GSM flaws that we already know about that are essentially unfixable because of the deployment of the GSM networks and the compatibility with cell phones. And now you're telling me there's these SIM card flaws that you can take advantage of over the air.
Yeah, so the biggest one is that because it's using old DES encryption, a regular kind of high-end laptop can crack the thing for your phone in under a minute.
Yeah.
Or about a minute.
Huh. Yeah, that's that.
So it doesn't take and then once the key for the SIM card has been compromised, the researchers say, quote, "We can install software on the handset that operates completely independently from the phone. We can spy on you. We know your encryption key for calls, so we can decrypt the calls after we capture them. We can read your text messages. More than just spying, we can steal data off your SIM card, like your address book and everything else that's on there. Your mobile identity. We can put charges onto your account. If you have PayPal or other NFC stuff on the phone, we could probably get that.
Yeah, one of the
any
things...
passwords you might store on the phone, everything.
One of the things that sort of jumps out at me here in the article is he goes on to say that he thinks that he's got about a 6-month lead on other like ethical type hackers. He says here that
the black hat. He found this and did responsible disclosure. But now that people know that there's this flaw out there,
they're going to be looking for it.
Yeah, he suspects the bad guys will have figured this out in about 6 months.
Right.
From now.
Yeah.
So he informed the vendors and the carriers and everybody, as well as the United Nations International Telecom Union, or whatever it's called. The Secretary General of whom said, these findings show us where we could be heading in terms of cybersecurity risks.
Yeah. As mobile becomes so... Mobile's in this exploding phase, right, where people are getting more and more powerful computers in their phones, and I think we as sort of general platform users are going to have to kind of go through this mind shift where a phone isn't a 5-year device anymore. Plus, a phone's going to have to be maybe a 1 every 2-year device if there's these kind of flaws. And we've covered Android flaws, now we've covered GSM flaws, now we've covered SIM flaws.
Android flaws can be fixed with a software update. They're just not doing it.
Right. And so as a consumer,
your phone actually needs to be replaced, per se.
But functionally, as a consumer, if I want to stay secure or patched, like if I'm concerned about that, I kind of have to upgrade.
If a phone is 3 months old versus 3 years old, it doesn't necessarily mean it's any more secure.
You don't really know, do you? It's like going to be different for each phone.
If they would release the patches so that they actually got to the phones, but they don't, and it's mostly the fault of the carriers, not the handset manufacturers or Google.
I think it's a symptom of the market, right? Because they've got these 2-year contract plans, and they need to incentivize people after that amount of time to upgrade, so they don't necessarily want to be pushing out new features. So there's that market aspect of it too. But then there's like sometimes these operating systems, when they include these fixes, they're not just including the fixes, they're including new features, and then there's new resource overhead. But at the end of the day, like if so right here I have a Galaxy Note 2. How do I know, as just like Joe average user, when this thing's no longer being updated? How do I know that? How do I know when this goes from a safe device to a risk? And if I'm a corporate user, if I'm a CEO of some company or something like that, isn't it even more behooving on me to understand that relationship? And I don't see how it's very clear right now. And these kind of things to me suggest that we're going to have to enter a phase while this technology is new, where we sort of rapidly upgrade, potentially, just to stay safe.
Partly, but it just not worth the cost. I'll just go back to having a dumb phone. I
kind of agree with you there. Yeah, I do. Because it seems like maybe I'll have a dumb phone and just have a tablet or something.
It really seems like, in that case, we need a fork of old Android that has security fixes and keeps old devices up to date.
Right, and I mean, there are ROM, communities. Cyanogen is obviously the big one.
Right, but then again, how do you trust that they're not putting spy stuff or that they're fixing all the holes that they know about and so on, right?
I don't know. Code. I guess you can have somebody out of the code.
If it's open source, yeah.
All right, well, geez, tell you what, Allan, crazy times. And it makes sense as these devices become more and more powerful and more connected, right? Because that's the thing, is they're always online. Any other thoughts on that story?
No, that's about it for that one.
All right, very good. Well, this is a good moment. I want to stop and bring up Ting, because this is a good example of a company that kind of changes up the incentive program around mobile providers. Ting is mobile that makes sense. I want to recommend everybody go over to techsnap.ting.com so you can check out for yourself what I'm about to tell you about. Ting has no contracts and no early termination fees, so you're not stuck in this 2-year cycle that's forcing you to go through this machine. And there's no bundling or ride-along services. You just go into one of these rate buckets and you pay for what you use. It's very simple to understand, and if you end up using X amount of minutes, then you'll just pay for those minutes. You don't end up paying for a bunch of minutes you don't end up using, and you don't end up underpaying. It's just exactly what you use. And if you go over to ting.com, you can also check out their devices. Now, all of these devices are unlocked, right? They're selling everything unlocked. Everything is contract-free. Everything is unlocked. Now, some of these devices you can get at a really, really screaming great deal. And if you go over and look at some of their used devices, you can get refurbished Ting devices. Like Allan, here's a dumb phone like Allan's talking about, a flip phone, $43, contract free. Nice. And then you're paying a flat $6 a month for the service, and then you will only pay for what you use. I've got right here on my desk 2 Ting phones. I've got my Galaxy Note 2 and my HTC One. I just pay $6 to have a line. Then I only pay for what I use after that. So if I don't use the Note 2 very much this month, it's not a big deal. I'm not wasting my money on a plan that I'm not using. This is great for testing. This is great for people that have to do support. This is one example of why the way Ting structure works empowers their customers. So you look at something like this where you get a dumb phone for $44, contract free, and you only pay for what you use. That is an outrageously good deal. And if you go to techsnap.ting.com, they'll take $25 off the price of that. That's half off the price of that phone. And now we're getting really outrageous. And they've also got some great used smart devices too. And some of these devices are great, like the Samsung Nexus S. Here's a great used device, $70, still getting updates from Google. Right, so this is another approach you can take, is you can get one of the Nexus devices for a really great deal, refurbished from Ting, and you're still getting your updates. And you also have a Samsung S3 on here for $300 unlocked. So go over to techsnap.ting.com, check out what they can do, and don't forget, Ting's going to have no add-on charges. They include hotspot and tethering with every plan, and then you just pay for the data you use, and the rates are clearly explained on their site. Combine that with their powerful dashboard that's easy to understand so you can see where you're at, and their excellent customer service. You can give them a call at 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern, and a real person who's empowered to solve your problems can answer the phone. Or if you're sort of a do-it-yourself fixer, you can go to help.ting.com. They have active customer support forums. Other customers are on there talking about things. They have powerful ticketing system if you just want to open up a help ticket.
Right, and those things right there show how they're a different kind of phone company.
By having a public forum like that?
Well, on top of that, but also their phone number is for the win, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just shows the attitude, right? The company behind Ting, Two Cows, has been doing the internet longer than most of us have.
Right, yeah, they get it.
They know how this stuff it goes.
And that's what I love about them is they've been watching markets for a long time now. And they say, you know, we're seeing somebody else do this, but we see there's a lot better way to do it. And we know it's really... It's services for smart people. It's for people that realize they've been getting taken advantage of and abused by the carriers. And also they know that this computing platform, which is becoming a very important computing platform, is being bastardized by some of these companies. Whereas Ting is flipping all of that on its face. And that's, as somebody who's a technology enthusiast, this is exactly the kind of thing that I want to see come out and disrupt the market. So go over to techsnap.ting.com, save $25 off your first month service, or if you bring your own device, or just take $25 off any device you pick when you visit techsnap.ting.com. And thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. All right, Allan. Now, moving on to our next news story. This one bit Mr. Michael Dominic on our Coder Radio program very hard. He was very grumpy this week because he's unable to get status updates for a lot of his clients, for his own apps in the Apple App Store, because their developer center was taken offline. And now it looks like we've got somebody claiming credit for it, don't we?
Yeah.
Tell me all about this.
Apple's Developer Center went offline last Thursday during or after the show. And on Sunday, finally, Apple revealed that they had taken it down on purpose as a precaution after a major security breach.
Took them a few days. Took them till Sunday. Yeah. And I think, honestly, it was only because it was starting to get some attention online.
Yeah, but, it's an important service, and we're just going to shut it down and not tell anybody why for a couple of days.
Yes. They're so weird like that. Kind of typical, though. And I think by Sunday, the messaging had started to come out. When they did that, we were hacked, we were attacked. And then you saw pretty quickly this guy came out and said, well, wait a minute. I don't like the way they're portraying me in this scenario. Like, the guy kind of outed himself to sort of defend himself from the messaging that Apple was putting out there.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting case where he does what sounded like responsible disclosure, but still got kind of painted in a bad guy light.
Right. All right. So security researcher Ibrahim Belek said that it was him that found the problem and reported it to Apple, and Apple took it down and said, it's been compromised, scary things, and so on. The company added that critical developer data had not been compromised and that they were working day and night to fix the vulnerability and bring the site back online. At a certain point, working day and night becomes deleterious rather than advantageous, right?
Yeah.
At some point, the admin needs sleep or he's going to start making mistakes.
I imagine Tim Cook's down there, whoosh, whoosh, fix the servers. Whoosh. And I guess actually in their statement, they said they're going to rebuild some of the infrastructure too.
Yes, because they realized they were doing it wrong. Yeah. So according to the website 9 to 5 Mac, in an email, Balik is persistent in stating that he did this for security research purposes and does not plan to use this information in any malicious manner. Although that seems to mean he did exfiltrate the data rather than just find the flaw and report it right away.
Right.
He actually did copy the data. So, that
believed to be about 100,000 accounts, I think. According to a video he put out, right?
The big difference here is to have an Apple developer account, you have to pay like $100, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that means there may be payment details to add to all these accounts as well. I think that's covered somewhere here. Yeah. So Balik also says that in his effort was not intended to be malicious and that he reported his findings to Apple just hours before the developer site was taken down.
Right.
Which is probably why they took it down.
Right.
He reported 13 different bugs to Apple. Originally discovered that iAd Workbench vulnerability on June 18th that allowed a request sent to the server to be manipulated. This security code could be used to acquire the names and email addresses of all iTunes users, even non-developers. So he told Apple about that. After finding the loophole, he wrote a Python script to harvest data from the vulnerability and then display it in a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Which may have put him on Apple's radar. In addition to the iAd Workbench bug, he also discovered and submitted a report on a bug that caused the Dev Center site to be vulnerable to a stored cross-site scripting attack.
That's
Balik says that it was possible to access user data by exploiting the Dev Center issue. He claims that he did not do so. So maybe he didn't actually exfiltrate data.
It sounds like from some stories I've read, he took about 100,000 developer account records. So I don't know. Some people don't even think it was him. So
yeah, it's hard to say. It could have just been timing that he found something around the same time someone else did, or what. But as happens oftentimes, Apple's being quite cagey about it at first.
I guess it was a claim he made in a YouTube video that he got the data. Which is just now, Allan, just kind of like today, parts of the developer site. So this is now 7 days into it. Just parts of it, not even full functionality. Right now, just the iTunes Connect portion, I think, where developers can get into their iTunes App Store entries. That's the only part that's online. Otherwise, everything else, including getting access to the betas of iOS and Mavericks, which are in active development right now. They haven't been able to distribute beta to the beta testers.
It seems like this could be a major inconvenience, especially if you make your living off iPhone apps.
Apple released a statement saying, "We plan to roll out our updated system starting with certificates, identifiers, and profiles, Apple Developer Forms, Bug Reporter, pre-release developer libraries, and video first. Next, we'll restore the software download so that the latest betas of iOS 7, Xcode 5, and OS X Mavericks will once again be available to program members. We'll then bring the remaining systems online. To keep you up to date on the progress, we've created a status page to display the availability of our systems." So they are really rebuilding a lot of it, it sounds like. I mean, that sounds like, holy crap, that is got to be a nightmare scenario. I wonder if they were already working on this and just decided better to just pull the trigger, rip the Band-Aid off kind of thing. Wouldn't want to be there, Allan. That's got to be a, I've been in jobs where they're super under the gun. I mean, when you've got two really critical betas for the company and you're down like this, and you think about this, imagine if you were an app developer who had a flaw in your mobile app that is causing you to get bad ratings in the App Store because it's crashing. You have not been able to submit your bug fix this entire time. Then even once you get that bug fix submitted, once they come back online, there is going to be a massive backlog. Yeah. So developers have got to be pissed, I would imagine. I mean, Dominic was, Michael was in Coda Radio. It's a huge issue, and it underscores what it seems to be a continued problem for Apple is managing hosted infrastructure, managing cloud services. They seem to continue to not succeed in this area. If it's iCloud or MobileMe or the developer stuff, the only success story they really seem to have is the actual iTunes distribution service itself, which relies primarily on Akamai. So it's interesting to kind of see them struggle with this right now. Anyways, if you're an Apple developer, we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. You can email us for our extra show, TechSNAP@jupiterbroadcasting.com. All right, Allan, any other thoughts on that one? Are you chatting with
correcting the chat room?
That's all right. Somebody, That's
no, there's no
actually-
more thoughts on that story.
I'm surprised somebody made it that far without being wrong. Why don't we talk real quickly about these Ubuntu forums? I mentioned this in last, and now we've gotten some more details. My account was one of them. Yay. Here I am again.
Every account was one of them.
Yeah. Well, except for you. You probably didn't. I'm guessing you didn't.
No, I didn't have a Ubuntu forum account.
I did.
Yeah.
I've actually had an Ubuntu forum account since before it was ran by Canonical, because the Ubuntu forums were initially the unofficial Ubuntu forum set up by fans, because Canonical didn't even provide a forum service, and then later they became so successful that Canonical adopted them as the official forums. So what's the latest, Allan? What's going on with this thing?
The forums were defaced in addition to having the database compromised. So they put up this message at the front, and they specifically put a little thing in there about this isn't a hack by the Albanian internet mafia, which I think was big at the Syrian Electronic Army.
Yeah.
They're saying that Canonical or whoever manages the forums had made some mistake that they exploited, and then they stole a copy of the database. Apparently, the database contains 1.82 million registered accounts.
Heyo.
Although a lot of that's probably just people registering multiple accounts because you use it once and then you forget you had one and you make another one. Especially people that are reformatting their computers a lot to install Ubuntu and so on.
Yeah.
But that's a very large database. Apparently, attackers had access to each user's username, password, and email address, and any other information they entered in their profile in the forums. The passwords were salted hashes, but they don't say which algorithm they were using to salt and hash them. Whether it was a proper cryptographic hash like SHA-256 crypt, or if a lot of forum software does silly things like the MD5 hash of the salt concatenated with the MD5 hash of the password, and then MD5 that. So I don't know exactly which forum software they were using.
I think it was PHPBB, but I don't remember for sure.
Ooh.
No, it must have been vBulletin.
Probably vBulletin.
Yeah,
and vBulletin, if I recall correctly, doesn't use crypt. They do something wonky, which isn't as good.
I heard MD5 encryption being tossed around. That's what I heard was being used.
Okay, well, if it was MD5 crypt, that's not bad, but that's not great at all either.
No. Yeah. Man, I tell you what, Allan. This is. I guess I got one response to this. LastPass.
Yes.
LastPass.
Specifically, if you were a registered user and you reused the password from the, if you used the password used on the Ubuntu forums is the same as the one for your email address, you're probably going to have a bad time because they now have your email address and the password to your email address.
Gonna have a bad time. Yeah.
So especially that's one good thing about a service where you don't have your username isn't your email address.
Shane Qful in the chat room, which is probably right, says that it looks like it was sort of, quote unquote, maybe a rolling hash because the forum software had been, over the years as it evolved, probably as new accounts were created, it was using different encryption.
Right. That's very possible that originally it was a plain MD5 hash, and then they upgraded to MD5 crypt.
Yeah.
And then basically what happens is when you log in, once it's confirmed with the old hash that you have the right password, for that second there, it knows your plain text password because you just sent it to log in. It can rehash your password and update the one in the database with the newer hashing algorithm. And that works great. And it just means that anybody who hasn't logged in a very long time is still using an old hash because they haven't logged in to update their password.
Jeez. Oh, man. It just, I wish we could do all this without everybody having usernames and passwords. I wish OpenID had been a bigger success.
Yeah. I'm not sure why OpenID wasn't really.
Because it's complicated, I guess. I don't know.
Is it?
No, I mean, maybe. I don't.
I can understand.
I have a hard time telling.
Yeah. You see someone from the chat room points out that I think for vBulletin, it is the MD5 hash of the password concatenated with the salt and then the MD5 hash of that. Which means you're running 2 rounds of MD5 rather than 100 if you were using MD5 crypt. So that means it takes 50 times less time to hack each password.
I guess I'll give you a theory why OpenID didn't take off, because it was never in Microsoft, Google, or Facebook, or Twitter's best interest. Google wants Google ID, Facebook login. Microsoft had their passport.
I think part of the other thing was, when I looked at it originally was for Stack Exchange, kind of a lot of people's reaction was, I want to sign up for Stack Exchange. Why do I have to sign up for OpenID? Right?
Yeah.
Until there's like 5 services that every person uses that are going to use OpenID, then yeah, it kind of does present
You know
a
what?
problem.
I think that's a huge, because I remembered the first time I signed up for an OpenID account, that was, even though I knew what it was, I was like, I just wanted to really quickly create an account and get into this and be out. I didn't really want to go through this whole thing and pick a picture.
Creating an OpenID isn't all that hard.
No, it's just not what when you're not expecting to do that, it's too bad though. And I do sometimes use like Google. I'll use Google authentication or Twitter authentication sometimes, just because I don't want to have to create another.
Just
account.
a couple times, although a lot of times I don't like places that don't let me not do that.
It seems like cryptography could solve this. Like, it seems like there should be some sort of, public key, private key system that we could all use.
There was a plugin, the Fire GPG plugin for Firefox was working with this other group to try to do something where you would like authenticate using your PGP private key.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
They would send you a message, you would sign it, and they would have your public key to know that it was you that signed it.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
But PKI is kind of hard for people. And you also end up people lose their key, and then what? There's no way to recover a lost GPG key.
Yeah. I mean, I've also, just because I've used it so many years, like I've been using PGP since like PGP was a thing. Yep. And I was like a kid. And so I created keys I didn't understand. I didn't appreciate it. I just have keys out there, that I never.
And I have the CRM software that we use at Scale Engine. I wrote back in 2004, and it's used SSL client certificates. For authentication. So with that one, the handy thing about that is you install the certificate in your browser, and sometimes you leave a window open, and so your session is timed out, and you make a change and hit save, and then it loses it because you need to relog in.
Yes, hate that.
Because SSL happens before the HTTP post, it relogs you in automatically.
Oh,
works out very nicely. And then basically you can make it prompt you for the password for the SSH key or for the SSL key on your browser side rather than the website side. And then, you tie that in with a fingerprint reader and it's all set.
And speaking of logins, in the feedback segment, we have a question about centralizing logins using something besides Active Directory.
Inside your company.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll get a little bit of that. Do you have any thoughts on that story?
Ubuntu said that Ubuntu 1, Launchpad, and all other Ubuntu canonical services are not affected by this breach because they don't have single sign-on between the forums and those things.
Right. I guess that worked out. Yeah, I think that's probably a symptom since the forums weren't inherently theirs to begin with. And I think it's still primarily ran by volunteers even today. Right. Did you see that members of the Ubuntu forums community were going after the supposed hacker on Twitter, like having a back and forth with the guy on Twitter who was claiming responsibility for it? Like I guess he claimed responsibility on Twitter, so then people started piling up on him for doing it and calling him a jerk and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then some people even tweeted at him asking for the music that he used on the site because I guess he embedded music with the people like, hey man, what song was that? Because that was really great. I'd like to listen to that.
Well, I can understand asking for proof that he was actually the guy.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I just think it's
what was the password hash for this user?
Hey, that hack you did? I really like the music you picked. It's just Twitter is crazy to my face.
It reminds me of the good old days of pirated software when the key generator would come with
and play the MIDI music.
Yes, and it was always let's see how much stuff we can pack into this little 8 kilobyte executable.
What's funny now is I have it's not really the same thing. I wonder if it would work real quick. But I have Plex on my home server, and on Plex, when you go into a different TV show, it will automatically play that TV show. See, maybe it'll do it. I'll try it right now. And it kind of reminds me of that whole website thing. So if I go into Star Trek, of course, right? And then I go into, say, Voyager. I don't know if it'll do it on the mobile device, but yeah, it does. It starts playing it. It starts playing Voyager when I go into or if I go into TOS, it'll
Nice.
Isn't that great? It's kind of like the old websites. So anyways, don't tweet me asking for that music because it's copywritten. We'll probably get a takedown just because I played that, all right.
But yeah, that's
it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And sorry for all of you Ubuntu forum users.
I was just saying, it was interesting combination of the demo scene, which was just making visual and audio demos in like tiny little exe files, kind of combined with the word scene of key generators and so on.
Yeah, it's old school. It's old school.
Yep. It is.
All right. Well, speaking of something that's old school and awesome, I want to thank one of our sponsors this week, GoDaddy.com, old school sponsors of the TechSNAP program, and we really appreciate that. And GoDaddy's got some great offers this month. I don't know if it's like a summer blowout, so you guys better take advantage of these while they last, because they may be expiring here at the end of the month, and we are approaching that quickly. First one up, the best deal I think we're going to see in a very long time. You can get a .com for $2.49, Tech $2.49. Use that up quick, folks, because it might be going away. It's such an outrageous deal. Tech $2.49 when you check out gets a .com for $2.49. An additional .com is just $9.99 after that. So you get them for $9. It's still a great deal for a .com. You can keep using that code. It's like pulling that lever of savings. Thanks, GoDaddy, for the lever of savings. Also, while you're over at GoDaddy, if you want to try out some of their handy, quick-to-get rolling hosting, this is, you know how much I love when I'm working on a project and I finally get the idea or I finally get the time to work on it, like everybody goes to bed in the house early or whatever it is, and I can just sit down and get it done. One of the things I love about GoDaddy is I go over to their website, just a couple of clicks, and I've got a new Linux box up and running on their system. And if you use our code GO32OFF3, you're going to save 32% off that order. This could be for .com, this could be for .nets, this could be for several things. If you're going to do a lot of stuff, throw a bunch of things in your cart and then use the code GO32OFF3. GO32OFF3 will save you 32% off anything in your cart. And while you're over there, maybe you've already got everything you need. If you want to get some free private registration, use free 5. Free 5, and you get free private registration for a year. How about that? So all kinds of great stuff. Tech $2.49, that's my personal favorite right now. You get the .com for $2.49. And GO32OFF3 to save 32% off your entire order. And you can hear Allan quickly typing away to go get himself a .com for $2.49. Yes. Right, Allan?
Oh yeah, we've bought a bunch with that code. Just
I have
because
too.
They're so cheap.
Well, and I got a static IP recently for the house, and like I have a couple of different things that I might not always keep at that IP. So I register .coms and I point them at the same IP, and then later, if I change what IP address this particular thing goes for, I just go change it on the GoDaddy website. I don't have to change any of the applications I've configured to go to that IP. And when you're talking $2.49, why not do it right? So thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program, and thanks to all of you guys who take advantage of these offers. That keeps our sponsors coming back to us, and that keeps us on the air, and we really appreciate that. So it's a circle of appreciation. Thanks to everybody who supports our sponsors, and thanks to our sponsors. It's magic. Yes. All right, Allan, anything else in the news segment?
No.
All right. That means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Now, we got a tighter email segment this week, so that way we can feature a lot more emails next week when it's the double TechSNAP event. But we do have a great first voicemail, Allan. You know, we love getting the voicemails, and Michael just sent this in via an attachment live from the OSCON floor, which is awesome. Here, I'll play it for you.
Hello, Allan and Chris from OSCON. Michael Dexter here, and I've got a question for you. Something I bump into quite a bit is a small office needing some form of directory services. Now, most clients are using FreeNAS, and when that Active Directory server disappears, you get a bunch of giant, long user ID numbers for names, and everyone gets confused until they reconnect successfully. We need something better, such as ideally like a Raspberry Pi with a tiny little appliance with a web interface to drop your users into, and then the sharing available on the network. One other idea is a plug-in jail, or maybe a proper Samba 4 server. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that topic. Have a great show. Take care. Bye.
Great question. Probably a question a lot of people wonder.
Yes, I remember when I invented something or built something kind of like that quite a few years ago. It was for an internet cafe. And the idea was people would register on the website and create their username and password or whatever and pay. And that would go into an LDAP database. And then they would be able to log into Windows XP machines using that username and password from the website.
Yeah.
Although I did this with Samba 3, so it was a Windows NT4 style.
Yeah. That was how I've done it too.
And and so the admin tools weren't any good, and it was not good.
Did you use the NT4 admin tools?
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
I remember trying to do basically the equivalent of group policies, except it was basically like create this list
POL
of,
file, right? And then you'd save it to the netlog on share.
So basically, here's a shard of a registry tree,
yes.
and we will just apply this over top of the registry on that computer every time you log in.
Yeah. And anything that goes in that netlog on share, it's named what was it, ntpol.dat or whatever? I can't remember.
Yep. Yeah, something that where the file association made no sense.
I laugh, but that truly was the good old days, because I also did the same thing. I had a Samba 3 server that sat in front of an LDAP server that would authenticate the Windows users. It would also authenticate all of our intranet logins. It would authenticate and people. We would use I forget, we had like some pre-written code for all our PHP apps that would automatically tie in the authentication with our LDAP server. It was beautiful. It was wonderful.
And mine was all set up with bcrypt for the password, so they were all securely hashed.
Look at you doing it properly even back in the day.
Actually, maybe no. I think it had to have the password both in. It had the bcrypt version for all the Unix stuff and the website, and then it had like a NT hash for the Windows side.
Let me ask you a question. So in BSD, in Linux, I can specify the order of authentication that the system that should go through. Like I could say local
BSD,
LDAP.
I think it's the same file, NS switch.
Yeah. So he needs to look at that, right? Because it sucks when you have Active Directory or an LDAP server go down, because then essentially your box just becomes a big pile of turds, because like it can't even resolve file system names.
It will wait 2 minutes to time out.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you can adjust some of the settings. I'm pretty sure in like the NS switch, you could adjust it and say timeout trying to talk to the LDAP server after 10 seconds instead of 120 seconds.
So that could help. So that way when the Active Directory server does go down.
He said like it doesn't sound like that's the problem.
Right.
When he's not be able to reach LDAP, he just gets the Windows SID instead
which is
of
crazy. Yeah.
Instead of Bob, it says 507 dash blah blah blah.
Super long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's kind of looking to just sort of replace the whole Active Directory component altogether, anyways.
Well, yeah, basically the bit of Active Directory he was dealing with in that case was a real Windows server, and some of these offices don't really need one.
Yeah,
and they don't have an admin that wants to admin it, right?
So this is tough though. I know this is a question we kind of get a lot, and I never feel like we have like a really great answer to replace Active Directory.
Nobody's built this as an appliance, and it would be a really cool appliance to have like a FreeNAS, but instead of for storage, it was for a Samba setup with a web interface. Because I haven't looked at Samba 4, but Samba 3, the only web interface is like SWAT, and that is very reminiscent of the 90s as far as web interface goes, right?
Yeah. The one that I've made mention over the years, and I've only used it once or twice in production myself. In fact, the last time I used it, this gives you an idea, it was called Fedora Directory Server. It's now called the 389 Directory Server, hence the 389 LDAP port. It's an enterprise-grade, open-source LDAP server. It's designed for Linux, so I don't know how it would work on a FreeBSD or in a jail. It basically needs MySQL, Java, and a few other things. I don't think it relies on any specific Linux components, but they're official supported as Red Hat.
A directory server that's not OpenLDAP.
It's Open LDAP. It's LDAP v3, but it also has a graphical console to manage users and groups and do server management. Like it's got tools.
What it needs the MySQL database for if it's using OpenLDAP.
That's a very good question. They have it listed as a requirement, but I don't know.
Right. So I was just wondering, like, is this OpenLDAP or is it something you'd use in place of OpenLDAP?
No, it's LDAP because I've actually browsed
LDAP
it.
is a protocol. OpenLDAP is one implementation of it, right? A server.
Right. It's
like MySQL. Is it actually OpenLDAP?
No, actually, I don't think so. I think it's their own.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that
because they've extended it for like the UID fields and all kinds of like extra.
Yeah. So it seems like this 389 directory server is something you'd use in place of OpenLDAP to get started quicker.
Yeah. Well, so if you do an LDAP directory server and you want it to work with Windows boxes, like you have to add all of these fields. They have that. In fact, out of the box, it supports syncing with a Windows Active Directory. Like you can actually sync between the two. That's how compatible it is. So that's kind of compelling. You could throw it in a Red Hat or a CentOS VM, right?
Right. I'm just wondering. Also, is it portable? Right? Like, is it something you might be able to find in the ports tree?
Yeah, I don't know. It might be under Fedora Directory Server, but yeah, it just requires Java. See, I'm reading through the requirements now. I don't know why they would require MySQL. Maybe it's for some of the front end stuff.
But if it's LDAP, they're implementing it and using MySQL as the data store.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
instead of Open
I
LDAP
don't
because
remember
it's
it being like
something
that.
other than LDAP.
I think you're right. I just don't remember it being like that. But I do remember it specifically being very easy to snap in and replace for that kind of stuff. That's sort of my current recommendation, but it sucks. So if anybody has a better recommendation, we would very much love to hear it on the TechSNAP show because we get this question a lot. So email us techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com and tell us what you've used to replace Active Directory. Bonus points if you can log in your Windows boxes, your Linux boxes, your FreeBSD boxes, and even your web apps. That's an extra bonus right there.
Yeah, yeah. Like I've done it with an old Samba 3, but it seems like Samba 4 with an Open LDAP could work. It just seems like it would be a lot to set up, and there's no web interface.
Yeah, and it's if you're if he's trying to use it for like FreeNAS boxes and things like that, it's like you don't really need all the stuff Samba does. You don't really need all that, but maybe you do. I don't know.
Well, yeah, they didn't specify, but I imagine he means he has Windows clients, and so
I guess.
Yeah, they probably want the whole. They need the whole Samba thing, I imagine.
They wanted the whole thing, and then they got the whole thing. And they said, "Whoa, we don't need all this thing. We need less thing." Alexandre.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, it'd be very interesting to see how that could work in a FreeBSD or a FreeNAS jail plugin jail, just because Samba 3 will be running on the host system already. Right?
Mm-hmm. Could just do it that way and go old school. You could.
Right. Well, yeah, but you probably don't want to be messing with the Samba config.
Yeah, that's true.
On FreeNAS, because I imagine FreeNAS just overwrites that config out of its database all the time.
Probably, yeah.
Time to make a change. So yeah, this 389 directory server looks interesting, and as far as we know, nobody's made a little embedded device of it yet. Although, if you're a cool developer, you should do that.
Take Pogo plug, call it your directory plug. Just plug it in, boom, directory authentication for your network. Pow!
Yeah, any little device, and boom, you got...
I wonder, you might be able to put Open Directory, if you did Raspbian, you might be able to put 389 directory server on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, so
Although
Alexandre.
I don't know if you trust the network on a Raspberry Pi.
That is a thing.
Tiny USB thing. Yeah. But yeah, I remember back, when I was getting started as a consultant, I was thinking that, Windows XP with a Samba, using a Samba thing to replace having to buy a Windows Server license would be a market for these, 2 to 10 person offices all over town.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, in the end, XP was kind of getting to the end of its life, and Vista was coming out, and the Windows NT4 stuff wasn't going to work with Vista, so I just kind of...
Yeah, they made... funny how those changes showed up in Vista. Huh. Yeah. If FreeNAS bundled this in there, like this whole directory, like Samba, like if they could take Samba 4 and like just, fancy all that new directory services stuff up and make it real easy, that FreeNAS would have a small business killer on their hands, I would think. And you got to wonder because Microsoft, what do they call that? Windows Home Server was doing really good in business for a while because people liked that really small setup.
Yeah, and then Microsoft killed it because they didn't want businesses using it.
Yeah, and then they made a new small business server, but it's kind of overkill. Yep. All right, now I'll get to Alexandre's email. It says, "Hey guys, just a little question from a regular viewer. I plan on building myself a centralized cloud server in my apartment with Proxmox VE. I love Proxmox. Did an episode of last on it. The hardware will be based on Haswell Supermicro motherboard with IPMI, Xeon E3 1220 V3 processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 8 terabytes of storage, and an Intel dual server NIC. I plan to build the machine and install Proxmox VE and then deploy multiple VMs or containers. To reduce cost, I intend to virtualize multiple things. His pfSense router, his own cloud installation, his 8 terabyte FreeNAS setup, a WordPress website, asterisks for future VoIP purposes, and potentially more. But his question is, from our experience, is it a good idea to virtualize all of them in one place? It would reduce my cost of electricity and hardware, but in case of failure, I would potentially lose everything. Thanks so much from Quebec City, Canada, Alexandre."
It depends on a couple things. Virtualizing the FreeNAS is kind of iffy, just performance-wise.
Yeah, I was wondering specifically about that one.
If you kept the FreeNAS as a separate server, then you could have one or two, ideally two, machines running the virtual machines and then connecting via NFS or iSCSI back to the FreeNAS. And then if one of them died, you can just migrate the virtual machine over to the other machine and keep uptime. That's the standard setup for high availability for virtual machines.
Yeah, and in his setup, his disk is probably his biggest vulnerability, right? If a disk pops, a couple of disk pops, he could lose everything. That's probably his biggest weakness.
Yeah, and especially ZFS or whatever in FreeNAS is not going to be much use to you if it's working on virtualized disks, because it's not going to find out when there's a problem with the disk underneath.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, you're forfeiting some of the features there.
Yeah.
That's a good
So,
point.
depending how you're doing that, you would have.
Well, okay.
I would try passing, like, if you're going to have like 8, he talked about like 8 hard drives or something? Or
8 terabytes of storage, yeah.
8 terabytes of storage is have some separate space for the base OS, and then pass all 8 of those hard drives directly through, like the whole devices into FreeNAS, and then base your virtual machines so they live on the FreeNAS. And then you can still virtualize FreeNAS, just make sure it sees the real hard drives, right? And then you'd have basically this separate storage, but it's living inside your one virtualizer. And then
I'm looking at their options on Proxmox. I don't know if they, unless you're using iSCSI, I don't know if they give you direct access to the disk like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Local storage types are a directory based on an existing file system or an LVM group. Okay. Local backing devices such as a block device or a DRD
Local backing device, block device. Yeah, that pass the whole
that would work.
As a block device. And
Yep.
So then your FreeNAS is running in a VM, but it's using it has the entire hard drives, the real hard drives, and then you just have some separate storage where you actually have what's the thing? The base OS, Proxmox.
Some folks are saying it might not work. FreeNAS might not work on Proxmox. I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true. It says it uses KVM, and they're saying it doesn't work in KVM, but I don't know.
I'm not sure about that.
It does feel a little weird to have the thing that's controlling all your storage be a virtual machine. That just seems weird to me because, like, it just seems like there's more opportunity for there to be a problem there. The other, what do you think about pfSense being virtualized? We talk about this from time to time.
I've done it for a long time in my apartment, my old apartment. My file server ran Windows because it was also my media center. So it had a video card and hooked up to my TV and played videos or whatever. And so what I did is I created a virtual box and did bridge to both NICs, and the pfSense lived inside there. And then the machine over the virtual VMware VirtualBox adapter, that's how the file server was connected to the internet. And so my whole LAN ran through this virtual machine, and it works fine.
I'm looking right now. It looks like you can. It looks like FreeNAS will work. It takes a little bit of work, but it looks like you can get FreeNAS working on Proxmox.
Yep.
There's several threads. I don't know. I don't know if I'd actually recommend it. It is, first of all, it depending on what you're storing. You do have everything dependent on one disk, and then you also have the thing that's going to control and operate all of your disks is dependent on a virtual software that if it has any problems and that virtual machine doesn't start, that one virtual machine doesn't start, none of your virtual machines will work.
Right.
And none of your data is accessible. Yeah. I just don't know. I mean, you could always mount that up to the host file system. Or
again, he's building this at home, so telling him to buy a dedicated storage box and 2 virtualization head ends is overkill at the same time.
It is. I know, but it is what I have done.
That is what you have to do if you want high availability, like my virtual machines can never be down setup.
It's tough.
As far as the rest of his a whole virtual machine just to run a WordPress blog is probably overkill.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Especially if you only have 16 gigs of RAM, how much RAM are you giving to each of these virtual machines if you're going to run like 12 of them? Because that's not very much RAM in each one, right?
The WordPress machine probably doesn't require too much.
Some of them are small, but you can run WordPress in a jail on top of one of the other virtual machines or something.
Yeah, containers on
chat room
Proxmox
asks
do give
when,
you some breathing room.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the features of Proxmox is containers kind of like jails, so you can kind of get by a little more.
Right, but that's different than virtual machines.
Right,
well.
but so for example, we could put WordPress in a container, right? And then that might save them a little bit on resources. Sorry, what were we going to say?
The Soko in the chat room was asking when FreeBSD 10 will be released. 9.2 is scheduled to come out at the end of August. 10 is scheduled for December 31st.
Oh.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. The amount of stuff going on in 10 is just crazy, including the default change to Clang instead of GCC, and removal of almost every last bit of GPL stuff.
Oh, wow. We should talk about that when it hits.
Yes.
All right. Should we do our next email?
Yep.
Chris R. writes in and says, hello, Alan and Chris. First, I want to say I love the show and I've been watching from the very first episode. I have a question that I hope you can point me in the right direction. I have an application that requires a newer version of PHP than what is shipping in Ubuntu 13.04's repo. Wow, that must be a pretty new requirement. So what's the best way of upgrading just PHP? I have looked at .deb, but it fails to install all the required components. I also have looked at compiling from source, but have gotten so confused when it comes to working out what dependencies I need to install to get it to compile. Thank you for your help, Chris R. So, Alan, I thought this would be a great opportunity for you to mention FreeBSD.
Yeah, well, in FreeBSD, the ports tree has 5.5, 5.4, 5.3, and it had 5.2 until it was end of life. So you get to just choose whatever version you want. But basically, if you're installing from source, when you run the /configure script with all your options, it'll tell you if you're missing any dependencies. That's the point of that script, is it checks all the dependencies. And so you just run it, find out what you're missing, and add it and repeat a bunch of times, although there's usually a README file that explains what you need. So solving the dependencies for PHP shouldn't be that big of a deal. It's usually quite liberal, right? It's, just because you're using PHP 5.4, you shouldn't really need any newer libraries than what you have. It'll just be whether you're missing a library.
Yeah. So he mentioned he was on Ubuntu, and I think he was kind of going about it the wrong way.
13.04 would be the extended support version or whatever, right?
No, that's 12.04. 13.04 is the current sort of like in-between release that's out right now. It's current, but...
Right, so... Yeah, I guess they're probably still shipping 5.3, though, right?
I don't know. I'll tell you, though. One thing you could do is I'll link to it in the show notes. There is a PPA that's hosted on the Launchpad, Canonical's Launchpad site, and they have a version of PHP in here that you can just add this PPA to your Ubuntu install. It's version 5.417, and it was updated on the 17th of July. So it looks pretty current.
Right, although 5.5 is out now. But I don't know any software that requires 5.5. There are a lot of new features in 5.5 that will be really cool, but
so this
especially
PPA,
since most places don't have it, it's not going to be a requirement of WordPress anytime soon.
So it looks like about 8 days ago was the last time it was updated. So this PPA, if you add this to your Ubuntu 13.04 install, it'll just add that repo to your package manager that should resolve the dependencies, and then as they update, we'll give you updates. So we'll link to that in the show notes.
Yep.
That's probably...
And then remember, we've talked about Rackspace's, was it IUS community? Where they have a CentOS repo.
Oh.
Because by default, CentOS, if you have CentOS 5, you're stuck with like PHP version like 5.0 and MySQL 5.1.
Right.
And that's, all you get. Because they only do version changes like PHP each time they update major versions, right? So the newer version of PHP didn't come until CentOS 6. And the version that CentOS 6.0 shipped with is the version of PHP that will be there for the entirety of CentOS 6.
Right.
And sometimes your web app needs something newer. So Rackspace originally created this repo internally for their customers of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. But it's an open community-driven thing now where it has, the latest versions of stuff. Because I remember one of our consulting company's customers was using CentOS or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and we went to install Nginx on the server for them, right? And grabbed the latest version out of Yum, and it was like 0.6. Meanwhile, like at the time, I think 0.9 was the newest. And so that was like a year and a half of new features and major bug fixes.
That's the thing. Isn't it crazy? As a FreeBSD user, that must just seem bizarre to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although we kind of do the same thing. Like a lot of people will notice, like, oh, why is FreeBSD still using this version of OpenSSL from a long time ago?
Right.
It's like, well, we backward security fixes, but the core version doesn't change.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about FreeBSD is if you want the newer version, it's in the ports tree and you can install it. But in order to not break anything you've compiled against something, you're guaranteed that nothing that comes with the system will break your stuff anywhere inside 8.x or 9.x. It's only upgrading major versions where you'll have to deal with that breakage.
I love how the chat room, like, few of them have built PHP today. Like, they're talking to the chat room like this is a common thing. People are still, I guess PHP is still the bane of web admin's existence in some regards. This application needs this version. That application needs that version.
If you're in charge of running web apps, I'd much rather, especially in a multi-tenancy where you're going to have more than one app on a server, PHP versus Python or Ruby.
Yeah.
I take PHP 1,000 times a day over Ruby or Python, because basically you need a completely dedicated setup for each app.
Yeah.
That's why virtual machines have been so big for PHP or for Ruby and Python.
Yeah.
It is basically you need a completely isolated setup for each app.
That sounds awful. Awful. All right, Awesome Source Rex writes in, Allan. He says, at the risk of looking like a complete noob, how does one learn how to become a pen tester? I'm in college right now for computer science, but 90% of it is total boring crap, like MS Word and Windows shares, etc. I've just gotten into Linux, and I'm astounded by the huge world of computing I never knew existed. I've watched lots of old TechSNAP episodes and been fascinated by the shows, even though I don't understand 90% of it. I found an online CBT course for networking which covered packet switching, the OSI model, etc. I loved it, and I want to learn more about security, and I have no idea where to start. I downloaded Kali Linux, and I ordered the older version of Backtrack. I don't know where to even start. There are so many tools, I don't know what they even do or how or what they are needed for and what tasks they perform. And I try to play around with one to learn it, and I don't know what I'm doing at all. I feel like a 3-year-old at the controls of a fighter jet, and I know it can do amazing things, I just have no idea how to use it. Where could someone learn this? I know probably it's easy to learn, and I'm willing to put the time and effort in. As one of the only 5 girls in comp sci at my college, I get patronized every time I try to ask anything. When I've tried to ask about how to learn security, they give me a smirk and tell me I should focus on something else. I hope you guys can point me in the right direction. Well, actually, I would say Awesome Source Rex is already kind of in the right direction, downloading Kali Linux and Backtrack. And I totally understand the whole overwhelmed aspect, because like in Kali Linux and Backtrack, you click that menu, there's like a billion, there's like so many different apps in there. Some of them open up the command line and do nothing. Some of them open up GUIs. It can be very overwhelming.
Yeah, and it might help to pick one particular area to focus on, like, web app security. And then, you're looking at like things like Nikto and so on that scan a web app and try to find things like, if I enter this value into this form field, the resulting page executes the code I entered, right? And it just, it tries things like that, and it just helps you kind of get a grasp on it sooner. So yeah, something like one of those web application scanners.
I would recommend too,
a good place to start.
One of the things is like when you're playing with Kali Linux, which I would pick a couple of tools out of there and then just go read all about them. And then what you need to point it at something where you get the results to verify you're doing it right. Because sometimes when you audit machine that doesn't have any problems, you don't get anything back to learn from. So I just highlighted in this week's Linux Action Show. It was season 27, episode 10, Linux Drive Recovery. I talked about a new VM out there called Honey Drive, and it's an OVA you download and import into VirtualBox. And it's a specifically compromised version of Ubuntu 12.04, which includes a version of an SSH server that's specifically designed to have flaws and then record and document everything you do, so then you can kind of play back and look at what happened. And it includes metrics to give you information, and it includes a README with all of the tools that you should try, where all of their config files are, how you start them, how you stop them, and in some cases where you can go read more about them. So when you take something like Kali Linux and then you throw it at something like Honey Drive, you got your weapon, and then you got your victim, and you can kind of simulate a real world attack, and then you just pick what you want to go after.
Yep. The chat room reminded me of another thing is Metasploitable.
Yeah.
All right, so Metasploit is a good tool for scanning a machine to see if it's vulnerable. But what Metasploitable is a pre-built VM that has vulnerabilities in it that Metasploit will find. And it basically comes with some instructions so that you actually get to scan it with Metasploit, find this list of vulnerabilities, and go through and exploit them and actually see what's happening. So it kind of gives you this rich target environment where you can go in there and do a bunch of things and actually see what you can do.
I did a Linux Action Show on it a long time ago, like a year or two ago. I can't remember what it was.
Right, because I remember bringing it up, and then you did the episode about it.
Yeah, I did an episode on the Linux Action Show a bit ago where I did a live hack of I can't remember the machine now, and it was great. And I used Metasploitable as my target because I knew I needed something that was guaranteed vulnerable. And it was fun because, so the big part about pen testing is discovering vulnerabilities. Like it's sort of like this, it's almost like a creative process. You get in there and you think like they think, and you island hop and you unlock new things and you get further and further. And that's the end goal. But to start, you got to know what you're going after, and that's why Metasploitable and Honey Drive are awesome.
Is it this one, Backtrack Review by Example?
Yeah, that's from Linux Action Show, Backtrack Review by Example.
Yeah, it's just about a year old.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about, because I found that Honey Drive, and I was thinking about combining that Honey Drive with like a Raspberry Pi, and I think a Raspberry Pi could be fun there. Yeah, there it is. Very good. Backtrack Review by Example. And in there, we went through how to use Metasploitable.
So you use Backtrack against the Metasploitable box.
Yep.
And so I think that's probably the easiest way to start. Is the best way to learn how to find something is starting when there's something to find, right? Because then you're not just banging your head against the wall for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it kind of gives you this idea. Like even the Microsoft security class I took, we purposely installed these vanilla Windows machines that wouldn't have all the Windows updates. And then we had these those fancy, really odd kind of Windows bitmaps that nobody ever used. What was it, like
WMF or something?
WMF, yeah. It was a special like Microsoft proprietary version of bitmap that nobody ever used for anything, and turns out it had this giant vulnerability in it.
Right.
So if you tried to view this one picture, it would show a picture, and there was also Open Calculator. And then it came with a tool where you could take any image and inject your own code into it that would make it do whatever command you had injected in this image file.
Executing commands by viewing an image file. Love it. Love it. All right, I have added links, and Alan has added links to the things we just talked about in the show notes right before.
So that should give you a good start.
Yeah.
But yeah, the biggest thing is, especially if you're asking questions, is ask more specific questions. It helps a lot.
Yeah, and also it's totally worth your time to dig around on YouTube and look at DEF CON videos, look at presentations. Yeah. People have lots of this
online. Look for Metasploitable. There's a bunch,
yeah.
While I was searching to find Chris's video, I found a bunch of other people's videos on using Metasploitable.
Yeah, they just don't have as good looking hair.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
That's the thing you got to remember.
This has the hair.
You got to keep the hair in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, asking more specific questions rather than just where do I learn about security that. Yes, you sound like a noob kind of, right? So you really want to focus like, I want to learn about, SQL injection. And then you can kind of start there and you can see what the mistake looks like in the code and how it looks perfectly reasonable, but then isn't. And then what you do to a website to actually do SQL injection, and then what it looks like when you can bypass authentication by typing 1 or 1 into the password box.
Right.
And things like that.
Pen2 also getting a hearty recommendation from the chat room, which is another penetration testing distribution with some new tools. And you never know, maybe they might do things a little differently. It might be worth checking out their approach too.
Well, yeah, the nice thing about the Metasploitable one is it's basically a class in a box.
Yeah.
Like it actually comes with steps that you go through rather than just dropping you this menu of all these tools and letting you try to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, that's the deep end approach, which sometimes can be overwhelming, especially with the crazy names. And the different behaviors that they all perform, and there's no commonality between them because they're all written by different people to do different things.
Right, it's not a tool set.
Yeah.
Another nice tool is the company behind Metasploit does NetExpose.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that's commercial software, but you can get a demo for free.
Yeah.
And it actually lets you scan your network and like all your Windows machines. And, if you happen to have admin on the Windows machines, it can pull the Windows machines and say, what Windows updates do you have? And then figure out which machines are wishing which updates, and what version of Flash do they have?
That's
and
nice.
What does it need to be?
Probably
updated?
Java.
So,
Probably Java.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all really nice. Yeah. There's a few tools out there that do that, but a lot of times they're expensive.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. There's some good links and good resources. We'll have all that stuff linked in the show notes, and then don't forget you can always stop by the Jupiter Broadcasting chat room over at irc.geekshed.net /Jupiter Broadcasting. Probably ask around in there, too. Somebody might have a good tip for you as well.
Yep.
All right, Allan. Well, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, give you some links to follow up on your own at the end of the show. A lot of these links, not always, but often, are supplied by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Allan, this first story this week makes me shake my head. I hope it's not true, but my gut tells me it probably is. It's been reported by actually a couple of different sources. It came out from a local news agent first. I forget all the details here, but the feds supposedly are demanding keys from ISPs. Their master SSL keys.
This wouldn't be ISPs, it'd be services. So like Google.
Okay. So that's why I'm confused. So the one that was from the local news was from an ISP. That's why I was confused. I think so. They're not the same story, but they kind of sound like they confirm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're two different stories.
Like your ISP might have some stuff over SSL.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe for email? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For email, probably.
So yeah, according to the
an anonymous source, I think.
Anonymous source, the U.S. government has approached service providers and asked for their master SSL keys for government surveillance purposes. Which, if you give them these keys, that's kind of it. I mean, where they can.
Right. Yeah. So the point of SSL is no one can pretend to be you because they don't have your private key, right? So if, for example, we saw in Iran where they made a fake Google certificate that was trusted, so they could intercept your traffic, pretend to be Google, your browser would accept it because it was a validly signed certificate, and then they could decrypt all your traffic, right? Now, in this case, rather than forcing certificate providers or certificate authorities to make fake certificates for Google and give them to the government, they would just go to Google and say, give us the private key to your certificate so that we can decrypt all your traffic. And that would allow them either to do a man in the middle and intercept everything or just decrypt it after they intercept it.
Yeah, CNET's running a piece on this too. I remember we talked recently about Google changing up their keys. They were going to increase...
Well, that was separate. As part of the regular SSL system, 1024-bit keys aren't allowed after the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
Everything has to be 2048 or higher.
Yeah.
So that's unrelated.
So this is a quote. The government is definitely demanding SSL keys from providers, said one person who has responded to the government attempts to obtain encryption keys. He spoke to CNET on the condition of anonymity, but he claims he's been directly requested by the government to hand over the keys.
Yep.
A Microsoft spokesperson would not say whether the company has received such requests from the government, but when asked whether Microsoft would turn over a master key used for web encryption, server-server email encryption, the spokesperson said, "No, we don't, and we can't see a circumstance in which we would provide it." Google also declined to disclose whether it had received requests for encryption keys, but a spokesperson said the company has never handed over keys to the government. So it sounds like maybe they're asking, but they're not getting.
Right.
At least you got to wonder, like, you go to some small guy, maybe some small-time shop, maybe they don't have the kahunas to stand up to the federal government. Keith Alexander comes in there and says, "Excuse me, citizen, I need to protect America. I need your SSL keys immediately." What are they going to say, right? Now, Google and Microsoft can maybe stand up, but Podunk, that was the story. It was this ISP said, as a Podunk ISP, where there's no defense we can take, and that was, It reminds me of, like, I remember I had friends from high school who started a ISP business, right? And they had the same situation where they had to come in and so they had to provide access to their records, and their whole thing was they didn't hold records, like they didn't want to have any records at all.
Right.
And they're out of business now. They were basically essentially squashed. Not only did they get forced into keeping records when their whole approach was no records, but through just continuous pressure, they essentially just gave up the ghost and said, "We're getting out of this business." And that's kind of during the time when the small ISPs were starting to close up. And it's sad because they don't have the utility to fight this.
A couple of years ago when they were talking about these data retention laws where they're going to force ISPs to keep everything you sent and received for a year, it's like, sure, Comcast has the money to do that, but the little ISPs don't have the money to build this whole infrastructure just to allow the government to spy on you.
Yeah. And I suppose we won't really know when it does happen, which it probably will. All right, now this next one's a link to the Bell System Technical Journal. What the heck?
Yes, so this is the issue of the Bell Systems Technical Journal, which was from Bell Labs, the company that invented Unix. So the issue that first described Unix, the time-sharing system that no one had ever heard of before, is now officially 35 years old.
Oh, wow.
So this is the original document describing Unix that Bell Labs had invented.
Wow. The Unix time-sharing system. Look at that. They got the PDFs up there. I'm downloading it right now. This is going to be my light reading after the show while I'm waiting for the files to encode. Look at that.
So this is 1978 is when this came out.
Part 2, the hardware and software environment. The PDP 1170, on which the research Unix system is installed, is a 16-bit word computer with 768 bytes of core memory.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Kernel occupies 90K bytes of equally divided between the code and the data tables. That's awesome. Okay, thanks, Allan. I'm going to have some fun with that.
Yes, we need to get Z Frank or somebody that does a good Morgan Freeman voice just to read a couple of paragraphs.
How
of that.
awesome. Let's get Morgan Freeman. I think TechSNAP's big. We could probably hook that up. Okay, Allan. We have a website that might be porn-related that's had some issues, correct?
Yeah, so this is the UK Member of Parliament who's leading the charge for this UK law that would force ISPs to block porn by default,
Right.
and you'd have to opt in to be able to view porn.
To see dirty stuff, yeah.
So her website has been hacked and defaced and covered in porn, and a blogger commented about it, and she then accused that blogger of being behind the attack because she didn't understand that he was commenting on it, not laughing at her.
Surprise, surprise. This is the lady that is...
yeah. Leading the and yeah, so I applied the hashtag doesn't know how the internet works.
We've seen some really backward stuff. We got the cookie warnings now that make every web page I visit completely obnoxious and make me want to shoot my browser in the face. Thanks, UK, for that. Thank you very much. And now we got this
EU,
porn filter
UK,
stuff.
yes.
Okay, whoever.
But yeah, and the porn filter is like, there's no way they can ever block all porn.
Right. It's so
it also comes down to what's your definition of porn versus what's my definition of porn.
Well, there's that.
Right?
And what happens if somebody gets classified as porn that isn't porn? Then what happens to them?
If you need if you're gonna have a default block like this, you need to have
a very
zero
clear way
false
to get out.
positive rate,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's just
And
it's
then
never gonna
also
work.
like
So,
who are they paying people to like find these sites and add them to some master list, or is some company making millions of dollars on some big
paying
contract?
some company, and so some
Disgusting.
company is paying this politician to drive their product and force it to be used, basically to legally mandate that all ISPs use their product, which is just horrible.
Maybe they could tie in directly to the NSA's PRISM filters, see where everybody's going, and then just dynamically build the database of porn and block it right there.
That would only block popular porn.
Well, that's good enough. Wow. All right. Next story in the roundup. It's an MIT story. As soon as my tab... There we go. MIT uses... I put this one in here.
Yes.
MIT uses machine learning algorithms to make TCP twice, yes, kids, twice as fast. MIT is claiming that they can make the internet faster if we let computers redesign TCP/IP instead of coding it by hand.
Right. So this is specifically about TCP/IP's congestion control algorithm. So this is how it decides when to keep sending more packets and when to wait and how to deal with it. And so they did this study. Most of it's based in this simulated environment. They didn't actually use real computers. They used a virtual network and like virtual machine networks and stuff. So I'm not 100% sure about all the results, but the idea was that under certain circumstances with certain levels of bandwidth, this could be faster. And basically, it would mean when there's a lot of people sharing a more limited amount of bandwidth, it makes more effective use of it by basically learning the patterns of what's happening.
You think this might be more of like a back-end plumbing thing? Maybe like busy network connection points might start implementing?
No, because the TCP control algorithm is at the endpoints.
Yeah, so they would not be able to get involved.
Yeah, so somebody in the middle can't change the congestion control algorithm.
That makes sense.
The interesting thing also is that what they were comparing to, they didn't compare to any of the newer ones. So like one of the projects that the FreeBSD Foundation completed last year was 5 new congestion control algorithms. So they basically created this pluggable system in FreeBSD where you can just plug in one of like 8 different congestion control algorithms. Right? The default one that Unix has been using forever is New Reno, but there's also Vegas, Cubic, and then the one I use is HTCP, which is delayed or loss based, so it measures packet loss and adjusts the speed based on that. And I found most success with it for like sending large, very fast streams of data between like across the Atlantic from like Toronto to Amsterdam.
Sure.
Because normally you'd run into bandwidth delay product problems there where the latency is causing your connection to be slower than it really could be. So because this one's based on the amount of packet loss rather than the amount of ping, it can make more use of it. But it also has HD and CHD, which are newer delay-based ones that make decisions based on the ping between them, or how long it's taking the packets to get back and forth. So yeah, it's all very interesting. If they actually make it a pluggable module for FreeBSD, I will try it out.
Well, there you go.
They have some source code. I'm wondering how much work it would be to actually wrap that source code up into a pluggable module for FreeBSD, because that would be really cool to have. And I would like to see some of their benchmarks done on real networks. Although, at the same time, it's hard to have a real simulate the internet where you have like delay happening.
Yeah, very hard.
And distance and hops and stuff without using the internet. But if you use a real network, then there's all these other packets getting in your way, and you don't know that, this is actually being caused by that. Right? So basically, you need an entire private internet that actually spans physical locations, and that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Next is on Linux. I don't think you can change the TCP algorithm. It's cubic, and you're stuck with it. On FreeBSD, there's a sysctl called net.inet.tcp.cc.algorithm.
There you go.
And you change that, and there's you have to load the kernel modules first. Load up the one you want, and then it goes onto a list of algorithms, and then you just set the algorithm to whichever one you want. Random
roundup question. All right, Alan. Our next story made me roll my eyes this week. The NSA, in response to a Freedom of Information request, says we can't really search our own emails, so we can't get you this.
Specifically, this was National Geographic had done
a very series, a
series about the NSA before the whole NSA It's Evil thing came out. And so as part of the Freedom of Information request, they're asking for the emails that the NSA sent back and forth with National Geographic. And the NSA is saying, we don't have the ability to search our email, like all of our email. Yeah. If you told us like a specific person, we could like kind of go through their email by hand.
Yeah, and they say they have no central method to search email at this time with the way our records are set up.
Yeah, so they can search everybody else's email using their big data system, but their own email system, no, they can't search.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Although I'm perfectly willing to believe they have some horribly antiquated email system.
Yeah.
Based on mainframes.
So U.S. CERT's put out a warning about DNS amplification attacks, something we've talked about before on the TechSNAP show. And
kind
of raising awareness.
We talked about it specifically before, but U.S. CERT actually put out an advisory earlier this week. And in it, they actually include some configuration suggestions. So like, if you have a bind server, which a lot of people do, it actually shows the config lines you need to lock your server down.
Wow.
And also talks about doing it for Microsoft as well.
Look at them.
But also doing things like you can set up rate limiting, saying only answer so many DNS requests per second. But they go on to say, be careful with that, because if your volume of requests is bigger than that at any one time, then it'll cause stuff not to work, because your client requests what is the DNS of google.com and you don't answer, then they can't get to Google or YouTube and so on. So basically, the general idea is lock it down so only clients inside your subnets can talk to your DNS server, and then people can't use your server as part of one of these amplification attacks, which is important for you as well as the rest of the internet, because it stops it from wasting your bandwidth.
Yeah.
But it saves the internet. So if everybody could follow these steps,
everybody could just help everybody else out. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. True tales of this sounds like something from a diary. The true tales of mostly white hacking.
White hat hacking, yes.
White hat hacking, yeah.
So this is an it's an Infoworld.com article, but it's basically a bunch of stories about white hat hackers and interesting things they've done.
White hackers. They're so white.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of cool ones on here about, like, there's one where, doing white hat hacking at a cable company. And so they had two TVs set up with the set-top boxes, one displaying a Disney movie and one displaying porn. And the researcher's job was to cross the streams to make the Disney one display porn remotely over the network. And so he had to figure out how to do that, and he did. And
that sounds like a fun challenge in a way.
Yeah, and his comment was, I was getting paid to sit there and hack stuff with porn running.
Right. I mean, that's what I was thinking. It's like, okay, I'm picturing that, and then like, I'm picturing like, how did he get the porn? Like, did he go on like a specific porn hunt for that?
No, it works for the cable company, so they have channels full of porn.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's got,
Yeah.
so it's just, basically hack into this set-top box and change the channel.
That's funny. Good for them. And that's good write-up, too. Good to read about that. All right, I think that's the last story in the roundup, isn't it, Allan?
Yep.
All right. So a couple of points of business. I want to remind folks that you can help support the network by using our affiliate links at the bottom of our website before you shop. We have them down there for Amazon and eBay and ThinkGeek and Netflix, and we have Chrome and Firefox extensions, which enable even more sites like Monoprice and others. But also, we want your emails. We're recording 2 episodes next week, so join us 2 hours early and send in your questions to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com. Hit the contact link, then choose TechSNAP from the drop-down. You can do that, too, or you can fire off a bit message. The address should be in our show notes. And so I would normally say join us live at 1 p.m. Pacific, but I'm actually going to say join us live at 11 a.m. Pacific, which
is 2 p.m. Eastern instead of the usual 4 p.m. Eastern.
There you go. Pow!
That'll be 1800 UTC instead of the regular 2000 UTC.
And you can also join us at jblive.info for the audio-only stream. And don't forget, you can grab the torrent version of the TechSNAP program. We have that linked in the show notes. We also have a torrent RSS feed. You add that to pretty much any, I think almost all of them now support RSS.
Almost everything has it now, yes.
You add that, and then automatically when the TechSNAP file hits the torrents, just start downloading, and you can help seed and distribute it. We always appreciate that as well. All right, Allan, well, thanks for the great show, sir. We'll see you next week.
Yep.
All right, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.